Julia Munoz stared at the 11 men who wanted her to fail. They sat around the mahogany table like vultures circling something wounded, their expensive suits pressed to perfection, their expressions ranging from thinly veiled contempt to outright hostility. The boardroom of Owens Global Industries stretched before her, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, dark wood paneling that absorbed light rather than reflected it, leather chairs that cost more than she used to make in 6 months. 3 months ago, she'd been emptying trash cans in this very building. Now she sat at the head of the table, a co-CEO nameplate gleaming in front of her, wearing a Valentino Power suit that felt like armor she hadn't quite learned to move in. The fabric was perfect. The fit was flawless. But it didn't feel like hers. Nothing in this world felt like hers. Behind her chair, Jason stood with one hand resting on the leather back near her shoulder. She could feel the weight of his presence, protective, possessive, but also distant in a way that made her chest tighten. He was there, but he wasn't with her. Not the way he used to be. "Mrs. Owens," Gerald Hartfield said, his voice dripping with false politeness. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, the CFO who'd been with the company for 20 years. "Perhaps you could explain these discrepancies in the third-quarter international accounts?" He slid a folder across the table toward her. Julia's stomach clenched as she reached for it, her knuckles white around the pen she'd been gripping like a lifeline. She opened the folder. Numbers swam before her eyes, transfers, offshore accounts, irregularities that added up to millions of dollars missing. And every single transaction had her digital signature on it. Her blood went cold. "I don't," she started, but Hartfield cut her off. "These transfers were authorized from your executive account 3 weeks ago," he said smoothly. $7 million moved to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Accounts that, interestingly, can't be traced back to any legitimate company operations. The room went silent. Julia could feel every pair of eyes on her, could feel the weight of their judgment, their satisfaction. They'd been waiting for this. Waiting for her to fail, to prove she was exactly what they thought she was. A cleaning woman who'd seduced a dying man and stolen his empire. "I never authorized these transfers," Julia said, forcing her voice to stay steady even as panic clawed at her throat. "Someone accessed my account without." "Your account?" interrupted Marcus Chun, the head of operations, his tone incredulous. "The one with biometric security? The one only you can access." Julia's jaw tightened. "I'm telling you I didn't." "Gentlemen." Jason's voice cut through the room like a blade. He hadn't raised his volume, but the authority in that single word made everyone fall silent. He moved from behind her chair, walking slowly around the table, his presence commanding attention without effort. "You're suggesting my wife embezzled $7 million, Jason said, his tone dangerously quiet. 3 weeks after our wedding, while she's been working 16-hour days learning every aspect of this company. "We're not suggesting anything," Hartfield said carefully. "We're simply presenting the facts. The transfers exist. They came from her account. We need an explanation." Jason stopped at the window, his back to the room, looking out over the city he'd built his empire on. Julia watched the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand curled into a fist at his side before deliberately relaxing. "Launch an internal investigation," Jason said. "Full audit of all executive accounts, including mine. If there's a security breach, I want it found and eliminated." "And in the meantime?" Chin asked. "While we investigate, perhaps Mrs. Owens should step back from financial decisions." "No." Julia's voice surprised even herself. She stood, her chair scraping back, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Every instinct screamed at her to stay quiet, to let Jason handle it, to be the good wife who didn't make waves. But she'd fought too hard to get here to let them take it away with forged signatures and manufactured scandals. "I will not step back," she said, meeting Hartfield's gaze directly. "I will cooperate fully with the investigation. I will provide any information you need. But I will not be sidelined because someone in this room," she let her eyes sweep across the mall, "decided I don't belong here." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then Jason turned from the window, and something flickered in his expression, something that might have been pride or surprise or both. But it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by the cold, impenetrable mask he'd been wearing more and more lately. "This meeting is over," Jason said. "You have your directives." Dismissed. The board members filed out slowly, shooting Julia looks that ranged from suspicion to barely concealed satisfaction. When the last one left and the door clicked shut, Julia finally allowed herself to breathe. "You should have let me handle it," Jason said quietly, still standing by the window. Julia's head snapped up. "Excuse me? They're looking for any sign of weakness. Any crack they can exploit." He turned to face her, and his expression was unreadable. "Standing up to them like that only." "Only what?" Julia felt heat rising in her chest, anger mixing with hurt. "Only proves I'm not going to roll over while they frame me for embezzlement." "Jason, someone accessed my account. Someone is trying to destroy me, and you want me to just—" "I want you to be smart," he said, his voice sharp. "This isn't the hospital floor where you can clean up a mess and move on. Every word you say, every move you make, they're watching. Judging. Waiting for you to prove you're exactly what they think you are." The words hit her like a slap. "And what do you think I am?" Jason's jaw tightened. For a moment, something raw flickered in his eyes, something that looked like fear or guilt or both. But then his phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen, and whatever she'd seen disappeared. "I have a meeting," he said, his voice going cold again. "We'll discuss this at home." "What meeting?" Julia asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Jason, what's going on? For the past 2 weeks, you've been disappearing, taking calls you won't tell me about, going to meetings I'm not invited to." "Business," he said curtly, already moving toward the door. "Nothing you need to worry about. I'm your wife. I'm co-CEO of this company. Everything that happens here is something I need to worry about." Jason stopped at the door, his hand on the handle. He didn't turn around. "The marriage was to protect you," he said quietly. "To give you my name, my resources, my protection. But there are parts of my world you're better off not knowing about, Julia. Trust me on that." Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the massive boardroom with nothing but the sound of her own ragged breathing and the weight of 11 pairs of eyes that had already judged her and found her wanting. Julia sank back into her chair, staring at the folder Hartfield had left behind. $7 million. Her signature. Her account. Someone was setting her up. Someone wanted her gone. And her husband, the man she'd risked everything for, the man she'd chosen over safety and sanity, was pulling away from her at the exact moment she needed him most. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and opened her banking app. If someone had accessed her account, there would be traces. Digital footprints. Something. But as she scrolled through the security logs, her blood went cold. Every single transfer had been authorized with her biometric signature, fingerprint and retinal scan. The security system showed her physically present in the building when the transfers were made. The timestamps matched perfectly. It was impossible, unless someone had access to technology that could replicate biometrics. Unless someone had resources beyond what she'd even imagined. Julia's mind raced. Jason's family had those resources. The underground connections, the illegal tech, the networks that operated in shadows so deep even light couldn't reach them. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept. "Mrs. Owens," a woman's voice said, smooth and cultured and vaguely familiar. "Or should I say, Miss Munoz? We should talk. I have information about your little embezzlement problem, and about what your husband is really doing in those meetings he won't tell you about." Julia's hand tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "A friend," the woman said, and Julia could hear the smile in her voice. "Or at least, someone who knows what it's like to be married to an Owens man and discover that the crown you fought for is actually a cage. Meet me at Café Noir at 7. Come alone. Or spend the rest of your very short reign as queen watching your empire crumble around you." The line went dead. Julia sat in the empty boardroom, her heart pounding, staring at her phone. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that she should tell Jason, should let him handle it, should trust the man she'd married. But Jason wasn't telling her the truth. He was protecting her from something, treating her like she was still the fragile cleaner who needed saving rather than the woman who'd fought her way into his world and refused to leave. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being underestimated, being told she didn't belong. She was done with that. Julia stood, straightening her suit jacket, her reflection staring back at her from the darkened windows. She looked like a queen. Now she just had to decide if she was willing to do what queens do when their throne is under attack. She picked up the incriminating folder, tucked it under her arm, and walked out of the boardroom. If they wanted to destroy her, they were going to discover that the cleaner who saved a dying CEO knew how to fight dirty. And she was just getting started. The clock in Jason's private study struck 2 a.m, each chime echoing through the silence like a warning Julia should have heeded. She shouldn't be here. Not in this room, not touching his things, not searching for answers to questions she was too afraid to ask him directly. But sleep had abandoned her 3 hours ago, and the ghost of doubt Catalina planted during that disastrous gala had taken root, growing like poison ivy around her heart. Did he know? From the very beginning, did he know? Julia's fingers trembled as she opened another drawer in Jason's mahogany desk, the wood cool and smooth under her touch. Moonlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. The city below was a constellation of lights, beautiful and indifferent to the way her world was quietly cracking apart. She'd told herself she was looking for business documents, anything to prove Catalina was lying about the embezzlement scheme. But that was a convenient fiction, and Julia had learned in these 3 months as Jason's wife that lies, even small ones, had a way of metastasizing into something deadly. What she was really looking for was proof that Jason had married her for love, not strategy. The third drawer revealed nothing but contracts and acquisition papers. The fourth held a leather-bound journal she didn't dare open. Some boundaries still felt sacred, even as she violated others. But the fifth drawer, the bottom one locked and hidden behind a false panel she discovered only by accident. Julia's breath caught as her searching fingers found the small key taped to the underside of the desk. Her marketing degree hadn't taught her this, her years as a cleaner had. She knew where people hid things. She knew the psychology of secret keeping, the spaces the wealthy thought were invisible because they'd never had to notice them. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room. Inside was a single manila folder, worn at the edges, the kind of thing that had been opened and handled many times. Julia lifted it out, her heart hammering against her ribs, and carried it to the desk where the lamp's soft glow could reveal its contents. The first thing she saw was a photograph. Her photograph. No, not her. The woman in the picture was younger, maybe 19 or 20, with Julia's dark eyes and high cheekbones, but her smile was different. Freer. Unguarded in a way Julia had never been, even before her father disappeared and her mother got sick. The girl in the photo wore a sundress and stood in front of a fountain Julia didn't recognize, caught mid-laugh at something outside the frame. Julia's hands shook as she turned the photo over. 2 words were written on the back in Jason's sharp, precise handwriting. Elena Rose. His sister. The one he'd mentioned only twice in their entire relationship, and never with details. Dead at 21. Murdered, he'd said, but wouldn't elaborate on the circumstances or who was responsible. The resemblance was undeniable. Not identical. Elena Rose had a rounder face, lighter hair. A softness Julia had lost somewhere between childhood and survival. But the eyes, the bone structure, the way her mouth curved. No, this can't be why. Beautiful, isn't she? Julia spun around so fast the photograph slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the Persian rug. Her heart lurched into her throat as she saw the reflection first. A woman's silhouette in the massive mirror that dominated the far wall, elegant and predatory in the moonlight. Catalina Owens stepped into the study like she owned it, like every space in the world bent to accommodate her presence. She was Jason's aunt, his father's younger sister, though she looked barely 40 in her tailored black suit and precisely styled dark hair. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, from wielding power, so long it became an extension of her body. "I had a feeling I'd find you here," Catalina said, her voice smooth as expensive whiskey and just as dangerous. "You strike me as the type who prefers truth over comfort. A rare quality, especially in Jason's world." Julia's mind raced, calculating exits and excuses, but her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm in my own home. I don't need to explain myself to you. You're home." Catalina's smile was a blade wrapped in red lipstick. "Darling, nothing here is truly yours. Surely you've realized that by now." She crossed the room with unhurried grace, her heels silent on the rug, and bent to retrieve the photograph Julia had dropped. Catalina studied it for a long moment, something flickering across her face, grief maybe, or the memory of it. "Elena Rose was my niece," Catalina said softly, almost reverently. "Brilliant girl. Wanted to study medicine, can you imagine? A daughter of the Owens family, wanting to save lives instead of control them." She looked up, her dark eyes pinning Julia in place. "She looked remarkably like you. Surely you've noticed." Jason mentioned she died. Julia forced herself to stay still, to not show the panic clawing at her chest. "He didn't say I resembled her. Didn't he?" Catalina tilted her head, studying Julia like she was a particularly interesting specimen. "How strange. Because I happen to know that resemblance is precisely why he gave you that black card. Why he let you into his life. Why he married you." The words hit like physical blows, but Julia kept her expression neutral. She'd learned that much, at least, in 3 months of corporate warfare and family politics. Never let them see you bleed. "You're lying," Julia said, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Catalina opened the manila folder still in her hands. When had she taken that? And pulled out more photographs. She laid them on the desk one by one, a tarot reading of Julia's worst fears. Jason younger, maybe 17, standing with Elena Rose. Jason at what looked like a funeral, his face a mask of controlled grief. Jason with Julia's photograph, a candid shot of her in her cleaning uniform, taken months before he collapsed in that hallway. Someone had been watching her. Someone had known. "Your father's name was Miguel Munoz," Catalina said conversationally, as if she were discussing the weather instead of destroying Julia's world. "Worked as a driver for the Owens organization for 3 years. Decent man by all accounts. Loyal." Julia's throat closed. She'd spent her entire life wondering about her father, the man who vanished when she was 2 years old. Her mother refused to speak of him, said only that he was gone and they were safer that way. "He had an affair," Catalina continued, "with a woman named Marissa Owens. Distant cousin, low-level family member. When Marissa got pregnant, the family saw it as a complication. Miguel saw it as love." She paused, letting that sink in. "Your mother wasn't the only woman Miguel cared for, Julia. You have a half-sister you've never met." The room tilted. Julia gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. "Marissa died in childbirth," Catalina said. "The baby survived, a girl. She was raised quietly, away from family business, given a different last name. But the blood doesn't lie, does it? You and Elena Rose share a grandfather. Your family, Julia. Distant, yes, but family nonetheless." "No." The word came out barely above a whisper. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Catalina moved closer, predatory and gentle all at once. "Tell me, did Jason ever explain why he chose you? Out of dozens of cleaners in that building, why did he hand you that card? Why did he trust you with his life?" Julia's mind raced back to that night. The way Jason had looked at her in that hallway, bleeding and dying, his eyes focusing on her face with an intensity that had felt too intimate for strangers. The way he'd said her name before she'd even introduced herself. She'd thought he'd read her name tag, but she hadn't been wearing one that night. "He knew," Julia breathed, the realization crushing her chest. "He knew who I was. Of course he knew." Catalina's voice was almost kind now, which made it worse. "Jason has spent years searching for Miguel Munoz's family. He wanted to make amends for what happened to your father. And when you appeared before him like a ghost of Elena Rose, giving him a second chance at redemption, well, what better way to legitimize his control over both sides of the family than to marry a woman with Owen's blood, however diluted. What happened to my father? The question tore out of Julia before she could stop it. Catalina's smile turned sad. That's what I'm offering to tell you, darling. The whole truth. Who ordered his death? Why? And what role the man sleeping upstairs played in it. Julia's blood turned to ice. Jason was a child when my father died. He was 15, Catalina corrected. Old enough to pull a trigger. Old enough to follow orders. She placed a business card on the desk between them. Help me take control of the Owens empire, and I'll give you every file, every recording, every piece of evidence about your father's murder. You deserve to know the truth. You deserve justice. Why? Julia's voice cracked. Why are you telling me this? What do you want? I want what's rightfully mine, Catalina said simply. Jason's father stole my inheritance, and Jason is maintaining that theft. You're the key to everything, Julia. With your bloodline and my resources, we can force a complete restructuring of the family. You'd be wealthy beyond imagination. Protected. Free. I'm already married to one of the most powerful men in the city. Are you? Catalina raised an eyebrow. Or are you just Elena Rose's replacement? A tool in Jason's decade-long game of redemption and consolidation? Tell me, Julia, when he looks at you, who does he really see? The question landed like a knife between Julia's ribs, sharp and true. Catalina moved toward the door, then paused in the threshold. I'll give you 48 hours to decide. Meet me at the address on that card, or stay here and spend the rest of your life wondering if your husband ever loved you at all. She glanced back, her expression unreadable. Oh, and Julia? Jason has a safe in his bedroom closet. Behind his mother's portrait. The combination is Elena Rose's birthday, 0-7-2-3-0-4. See what other secrets he's been keeping. Then she was gone, disappearing into the hallway like smoke, leaving Julia alone with the photographs and the terrible, growing suspicion that everything she'd believed about her marriage was a carefully constructed lie. Julia sank into Jason's desk chair, her legs no longer able to support her weight. She picked up the photograph of Elena Rose again, studying every detail of that laughing girl's face. When he looks at me, who does he see? Upstairs, she knew, Jason was sleeping in their bed, probably wondering where she was. She could go to him now. Wake him. Demand the truth. Or she could go to that safe and see for herself what else he'd been hiding. Julia looked at the business card Catalina had left behind, then at the photograph, then at her own trembling hands. 3 months ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was at the center of a war she didn't fully understand, with blood ties she'd never known existed, and a husband who might have orchestrated everything from the very beginning. The photograph slipped from her fingers again, but this time she didn't pick it up. Instead, Julia memorized the numbers Catalina had given her, 0-7-2-3-0-4, and stood. She walked out of the study with careful, silent steps, the kind she'd perfected in her years of cleaning other people's homes while they slept. Only now she was moving through her own home like a thief, and she had no idea if she'd ever be able to stop. The blood wouldn't stop. Julia's hands trembled as she pressed another gauze pad against Jason's ribs, watching crimson seep through the white fabric like a flower blooming in fast motion. The bathroom was thick with steam from the shower he'd stumbled out of minutes ago, the mirrors fogged, the air heavy and suffocating. But the heat had nothing to do with the water. "You need a hospital," she said, her voice harder than the marble beneath their feet. "No." Jason's jaw was granite, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the sink. He stood shirtless, water still dripping from his dark hair onto shoulders that barely flinched despite the bullet graze that had torn through skin and muscle. "No hospitals. No questions." Julia threw the blood-soaked gauze into the sink, her patience shredding like the tissue. "Then how about answers, Jason? How about you tell me who the hell shot you? It's handled." "Handled?" Her laugh was sharp, brittle. "You come home at 3 in the morning bleeding through your shirt, collapse in the shower, and all you can say is, 'It's handled.'" He finally looked at her, really looked at her, and something in those dark eyes made her breath catch. Not pain, not fear. Something worse, distance. like he was already somewhere she couldn't reach, making decisions she wasn't privy to, fighting battles he refused to let her see. "You don't need to worry about this," he said quietly. "Don't." Julia's hands clenched into fists, blood drying sticky between her fingers. "Don't you dare tell me what I need to worry about. I'm your wife, Jason. Or did you forget that between whatever meeting got you shot and stumbling through our door like a ghost? It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it." She grabbed a fresh towel, her movements sharp with fury as she pressed it against his wound. He hissed, finally showing pain, and she felt a savage satisfaction at breaking through that infuriating composure. Who was it? Marcus Voss? One of the board members? Or maybe Catalina finally made her move? Jason's hand shot up, wrapping around her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. "Don't say her name." "Why?" "Because she's family." Julia jerked her hand free, stepping back. In the mirror behind him, she caught their reflection. Him bleeding and unmovable, her with blood on her hands and tears she refused to shed burning behind her eyes. They looked like survivors of a war neither had agreed to fight. "You keep shutting me out. Every meeting I'm not invited to. Every phone call you take in another room. Every time you come home with violence in your eyes and lies on your tongue. I'm protecting you." "No." The word cracked through the steamed air like a gunshot. "You're treating me like I'm still that girl in the cleaning uniform. Like I'm something fragile you need to keep locked away in this golden cage while you go out and bleed for an empire I'm not allowed to understand." Jason turned to face her fully, and the movement made him wince. Blood trickled fresh from the wound, but he ignored it. "You think I want this? You think I want to come home wondering if someone followed me, if I've painted a target on you just by loving you? Then stop loving me like I'm made of glass." Julia's voice broke and she hated it. "I didn't survive everything we've been through to become some protected princess. I proved myself, Jason. I took down Catalina's network. I exposed the board. I saved your empire. And you still look at me like I'm going to break. Because you could." The words came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep. "This world, my world, it breaks everyone eventually. You want to know who shot me? It was someone I trusted. Someone who's been in my inner circle for 8 years. Someone who sat at our wedding and smiled and toasted our future while planning to put a bullet in my head." The air went cold despite the steam. "Who?" Julia whispered. But Jason was already shaking his head, already retreating behind that wall she'd spent months trying to scale. "I'm handling it. Damn you." The rage came rushing back, hot and acidic. "You did it again. You gave me just enough truth to make me feel like I matter, then slammed the door in my face." "Julia." "No." She stepped back, and then back again, putting distance between them that felt like miles. "You want to know what I think? I think you never stopped seeing me as her. As Elena Rose. Your dead sister who you couldn't save. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're not protecting me. You're trying to rewrite history. Keep me alive where you let her die." Jason's face went white beneath the blood and steam. "That's not. Isn't it?" Her voice was shaking now, everything shaking. "You knew about my bloodline before you gave me that card. Catalina told me, and you didn't even deny it. You knew who I was, what I could be used for, and you pulled me into this anyway. I fell in love with you." His voice was hoarse, desperate. "Whatever I knew, whatever I planned, I fell in love with you, Julia. Not her. Not the bloodline. You. When?" The question hung between them like a blade. "When did you fall in love with me, Jason? Before or after you realized I could be useful? Before or after you decided I was the perfect piece to complete your board? That's not fair." "Fair?" Julia laughed, and it sounded like breaking. "You want to talk about fair? You married me without telling me the truth about my father. You kept secrets about my own blood while pretending to build a partnership. You stood at that altar and promised me honesty while hiding the fact that you've been using me from the moment we met." "I never." Jason pushed off from the sink, and the sudden movement made him stagger. Blood bloomed fresh across the towel pressed to his ribs. Julia's instinct was to catch him, to help, to care, but she forced herself to stay frozen where she was. "You never what? You never lied? You never manipulated? Or are you going to tell me you never meant for it to hurt? His eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd known him, Jason Owens looked truly helpless. I was trying to protect you from the truth until you were strong enough to hear it. I was a cleaner who survived on nothing but strength, she said softly, and somehow the quiet made it cut deeper. I didn't need your protection. I needed your honesty. I needed you to see me as your equal, not your project. Julia, please. I'm sleeping in the East Wing tonight. She turned toward the door, her bare feet silent on blood-spotted marble. Don't follow me. Don't send your security. Don't, her voice cracked. Don't make me look at you right now. We need to talk about this. She stopped in the doorway but didn't turn around. We just did. And I can't tell if I'm more afraid that you'll die from whatever's coming for you, or that I've fallen in love with a man who will never truly let me in. Julia. Who shot you, Jason? The silence stretched. Steam curled between them. Blood dripped. Go to bed, he said finally, his voice hollow. I'll tell you when it's over. That's what I thought. Julia walked out, her footsteps echoing down the marble hallway, each step taking her farther from the bathroom, from him, from the man she'd bound her life to without knowing if he'd ever truly bind his to hers. Behind her she heard glass shatter. Jason's fist through the mirror, probably. The sound of a man breaking in private, because he wouldn't break in front of her. She didn't go back. The East Wing was cold. Julia curled into the massive bed that wasn't theirs, still wearing the sleep clothes now stained with his blood, and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. Ask him about the photos. Ask him who was really in the car the night your father died. Someone who wants you to know the truth. Julia's hand shook as she opened the attached file. It was a photograph, grainy and old. A teenage Jason Owens standing next to a car, a man's body partially visible on the ground. Her father's car. Her father's body. And Jason young, terrified, but there. The phone slipped from her fingers. In the West Wing, in their bathroom still thick with steam and secrets, Jason finally wrapped his own wound and stared at the shattered mirror, showing 7 fractured versions of himself. His phone buzzed. A message from his head of security. Sir, we have a problem. The leak came from inside the house. Jason didn't read the rest. He already knew who'd betrayed him. The only question was whether Julia would still be his wife when the truth finally came out. Or if she'd realize she'd married her father's killer. Julia had never been inside a place like this. The estate sat on the edge of the city like a Gothic cathedral frozen in time. All stone and iron and secrets. Catalina Owens' mansion wasn't just wealthy. It was old wealth. The kind that had survived generations by burying its sins deep enough that no one dared to dig. Julia's heels echoed against black marble as a silent man in a dark suit led her through hallways lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. Each portrait seemed to watch her pass, judging the cleaner who'd climbed too high, too fast. She shouldn't be here. Jason didn't know about this meeting. If he found out, it would destroy whatever fragile thread still connected them after their fight 3 nights ago. She could still feel the ghost of his hands on her arms, the desperation in his voice when he'd tried to explain away another lie, another secret, another locked door she wasn't allowed to open. I'm protecting you, he'd said. But Julia was done being protected. She was done being kept in the dark while the people around her played games with her life, her past, her dead father's memory. So when Catalina's handwritten invitation had arrived, delivered by a driver who somehow knew exactly where to find her, Julia had made a choice. A dangerous one. The man in the suit stopped before a set of double doors carved with intricate patterns that looked almost religious. He opened them without a word, then stepped aside. Julia walked into the dining room alone. It was a room designed to intimidate. High vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow despite the dozen candelabras burning along a table that could seat 20. Dark velvet curtains blocked whatever light might have come from the windows. The walls were paneled in wood so dark it was nearly black, and the air smelled of expensive wine and something Julia couldn't quite place, something old and faintly metallic. At the far end of the table sat Catalina Owens. She was exactly as Julia remembered from their one brief, terrible encounter at Jason's office. Elegant in a way that felt weaponized. Mid-40s, with silver threading through her dark hair like deliberate decoration. She wore black, a high-necked dress that looked Victorian and modern at once, and held a wine glass with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. Two men flanked the shadows behind her. Julia couldn't see their faces clearly, but she could feel their presence like weight pressing against her chest. "Julia." Catalina's voice was warm honey over broken glass. "I'm so pleased you came. Please sit." Julia didn't move from the doorway. "You said you had information about my father." "I do." Catalina gestured to the chair at the opposite end of the long table. "But surely we can be civilized about this. I had my chef prepare. I'm not here to eat with you." A smile curved Catalina's lips. "Not offended. Amused." "No, I suppose you're not." She set down her wine glass with deliberate care. "You're here because my nephew has been lying to you. And you've finally realized that the man you married might be exactly the monster everyone warned you about." The words hit like a physical blow. Julia's hands clenched at her sides. "Sit down, Julia," Catalina said again, softer this time. "Please. What I have to show you, you'll want to be sitting down." Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Julia walked to the chair and sat. The distance between them felt like a chasm. The candlelight created dancing shadows across Catalina's face, making her beautiful and terrible all at once. "Let me tell you a story," Catalina began, "about your father, Roberto Muñoz." Julia's throat tightened. "You knew him?" "I knew of him. He was a driver for the Owens family 23 years ago. Loyal. Quiet. The kind of man people trust because he seems invisible." Catalina leaned forward slightly, her eyes sharp. "But your father was very, very observant. And one night, he saw something he wasn't supposed to see." "What?" Julia's voice came out hoarse. Catalina reached beside her chair and lifted a leather folder onto the table. She slid it across the polished wood with one finger. It came to rest exactly halfway between them, close enough for Julia to reach, far enough that she'd have to commit to taking it. The Owens fortune didn't come from real estate and shipping, despite what the press releases say. Catalina's voice was almost gentle now, the way a surgeon might be gentle before making the first cut. It came from moving people. Women and children, mostly from countries where no one would look for them. It was a different time. The family has spent 40 years burying that history. Legitimizing. Cleaning the blood off the money. Julia felt sick. "Jason was a child when it was happening." "Yes." Catalina nodded. "But your father discovered documents. Ledgers. Proof of what the family had built itself on. He was going to take it to the authorities." Julia's hand moved toward the folder, then stopped. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your father died that night. Shot in an alley 3 blocks from the Owens estate. The police ruled it a robbery. The case went cold." Catalina's eyes never left Julia's face. "But it wasn't a robbery, Julia. It was an execution. And there was a witness." The room suddenly felt airless. "Open the folder," Catalina said quietly. Julia's hands shook as she reached for it. The leather was soft, expensive, the kind of thing that had held important documents for decades. She opened it slowly. Inside were photographs. Old ones printed on the kind of photo paper that had largely been replaced by digital. The first showed a man, her father, younger than she'd ever known him, wearing a driver's uniform, standing beside a black car. The second photograph stole the air from her lungs. It was taken at night, grainy and dark, but clear enough. An alley. A man on the ground, her father. She knew it was her father even though his face was turned away. And standing over him, arm extended, holding a gun. A boy. 15, maybe 16 years old. Tall and thin in an expensive suit that hung awkwardly on his adolescent frame. Julia would have recognized those eyes anywhere, even young, even terrified, even guilty. "Jason." "No." The word came out broken. "No, this isn't." "I know it's difficult," Catalina said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But you needed to see the truth. Jason's father ordered the hit. But Jason pulled the trigger. His first kill. His initiation into the family business. Julia couldn't breathe. The photograph blurred in front of her eyes. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. But she'd seen Jason's face when they'd fought. She'd seen the guilt written into every line of his body when he'd tried to explain why he'd given her the black card that first night. Why he'd searched for her family. Why he'd looked at her like she was a ghost haunting him. I've been trying to make amends. Oh God, is this what he'd meant? He killed my father. Julia's voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else's body. Yes. Catalina leaned back in her chair. And then he found you. The daughter of the man whose death has haunted him for 20 years. And he saw an opportunity. Redemption, perhaps. Or maybe just a way to quiet his guilty conscience. He married you, brought you into his world, made you fall in love with him. She paused. Tell me, Julia, did it ever feel like he chose you? Or did it feel like he was trying to save himself? The question cracked something open inside Julia's chest. Because she didn't know. She didn't know anymore. Why are you showing me this? Julia forced herself to look up, to meet Catalina's eyes across the candlelit expanse. What do you want? Finally, the pretense of sympathy dropped from Catalina's face. What remained was pure calculation. I want what's mine, she said simply. The Owens empire was built by my father and my brother, Jason's father. But Jason inherited everything because he's male, because he's the legitimate heir. He's spent years trying to make the family clean, cutting ties with the operations that actually made us powerful. He's weak, sentimental. Her eyes glittered. You could help me change that. You want me to betray him. I want you to choose the truth over a lie. Catalina's smile was razor-sharp. Jason used you. He saw you as a tool for his redemption, a living apology for the sin he committed. But you're so much more than that, aren't you? You've proven yourself in his world. The board respects you now. The shareholders listen when you speak. She leaned forward, predatory and focused. Help me remove Jason from power. Help me take control of the company. And in return, I'll give you everything. Proof of what happened to your father, testimony that will finally give him justice, and a position of real power in the new regime. Not as someone's wife. As yourself. Julia's mind was spinning. This was insane. This was. And if I refuse? Catalina's expression didn't change. Then I'll release these photographs to the press. To the police. To everyone. Jason will be arrested for a murder committed when he was a child, acting under his father's orders. He'll claim coercion, of course. It might even be true. But the trial will destroy him. Destroy the company. Destroy everything he's built. And you. She tilted her head. You'll be left with nothing but the knowledge that you married your father's killer. The men in the shadows behind Catalina shifted slightly. A reminder that Julia wasn't negotiating from a position of strength. She looked down at the photograph again. Jason's young face, frozen in the worst moment of his life. And her father, dying in an alley while the boy who would someday give her his black card, his name, his damaged heart. While that boy ended his life. I need time, Julia heard herself say. You have 48 hours. Catalina rose from her chair with fluid grace. After that, I move forward with or without you. Choose wisely, Julia. Choose for yourself this time, not for love. Love is a luxury people like us can't afford. Julia stood on trembling legs. The folder was still in her hands. Evidence. Proof. The truth she'd been searching for, delivered by a woman who had every reason to lie and every ability to manipulate. But the photograph looked real. And more than that, it explained everything. Every haunted look in Jason's eyes. Every moment he'd tried to push her away. Every time he'd said he didn't deserve her. Because he didn't. Because he'd destroyed her family before she even knew he existed. Julia. Catalina's voice stopped her at the door. One more thing. Jason knows you're here. Julia's blood turned to ice. What? Did you really think you could come to my estate without him finding out? The boy has eyes everywhere. Catalina's smile was almost pitying now. He's probably waiting for you at home right now. And when you see him, when he tries to explain, ask yourself this, is he telling the truth? Or is he just desperate not to lose his redemption project? Julia didn't respond. She couldn't. She walked out of that Gothic dining room, through the hallways of portraits and judgment, and out into the night where her car waited. Her hands were still shaking when she started the engine. The leather folder sat on the passenger seat like a bomb. And somewhere across the city, in the penthouse they shared, Jason was waiting. Julia had 48 hours to decide: believe the man she loved, or believe the evidence of his darkest sin. She had no idea how she'd choose. But as she drove through the dark city streets, one truth burned clear: nothing would ever be the same again. The penthouse was silent when Julia returned, but it was the kind of silence that screamed. She stood in the elevator, watching the floor numbers climb, Catalina's folder clutched against her chest like a shield. Inside were photographs, grainy, decades old, but clear enough. Clear enough to show a 15-year-old boy standing in a warehouse, his father's hand gripping the back of his neck. Clear enough to show the body on the ground. Clear enough to destroy everything she'd allowed herself to believe about the man waiting upstairs. The elevator doors opened directly into their home. Their home. When had she started thinking of it that way? The living room stretched before her in shadows and city light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a Lagos that never truly slept, its lights glittering like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Beautiful. Cold. Exactly like the world Jason Owens had been born into. She found him where she knew she would, standing at those windows in his study, still dressed in the suit he'd worn to whatever meeting he'd refused to tell her about. His jacket was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He didn't turn when she entered, but his shoulders tensed. He knew. You met with her. His voice was flat, emotionless. The voice he used in boardrooms when he was about to destroy someone. Julia's fingers tightened on the folder. Yes. And she showed you. Not a question. Never a question with Jason. He already knew all the answers. He just waited to see if you'd lie. She showed me everything. Julia's voice cracked on the last word, betraying her. She cleared her throat, forced steel into it. Were you there, Jason? The night my father died, were you there? Finally, he turned. The city lights behind him cast his face in shadow, but she could see his eyes. Those dark, dangerous eyes that had looked at her with heat and hunger, and something she'd foolishly believed was love. Yes. The word hit her like a physical blow. She'd expected denial, justification, anything but that cold, simple truth. Did you kill him? Her voice was barely a whisper now. Jason moved then, crossing the room with that predatory grace that had once made her pulse race for entirely different reasons. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, far enough that she could still breathe. No. He paused, his jaw working. But I was supposed to. Julia's legs nearly gave out. She stumbled backward until her spine hit the wall, the folder slipping from her numb fingers to scatter photographs across the Persian rug. Images of violence, of death, of the boy who'd become the man standing before her. My father gave me the gun. Jason's voice was still controlled, but something raw bled through the edges. Your father had discovered things, terrible things about the family business. Human trafficking networks that went back generations. My grandfather's sins that my father had inherited and expanded. Your father was going to expose everything. So you killed him. Julia's words were acid. No. Jason closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands slamming against the wall on either side of her head. Not threatening, pleading. I refused. I was 15 years old and I'd already seen too much death, but I couldn't. His voice broke, and Julia saw something she'd never witnessed before, Jason Owens fracturing. My father beat me unconscious for my disobedience. He wasn't looking at her anymore, his gaze fixed somewhere past her shoulder, lost in memory. When I woke up, I was lying next to your father's body. There was blood on my hands. My father told me I'd done it during a blackout, that the family would protect me, that I was truly one of them now. Julia's breath came in short gasps. You believed him? I was 15. Jason's hands curled into fists against the wall. I carried that guilt for years. It poisoned everything. Every success felt stolen. Every moment of happiness felt unearned. I thought I was a murderer, Julia. I thought I was my father's son in the worst possible way. When did you learn the truth? 3 years ago. I found my father's private records after he died. Video footage from the warehouse. I watched him pull the trigger while I was unconscious on the floor. I watched him stage the scene. I watched him create the monster he wanted me to be. The confession hung between them like smoke, choking and bitter. Julia's mind raced. She wanted to believe him. God, how desperately she wanted to believe him. But Catalina's words echoed in her skull. He's had years to perfect this story. Years to prepare for the day you'd discover the truth. Why didn't you tell me? The question ripped from her throat. When you realized who I was, when you gave me that card, why didn't you tell me everything? Jason finally met her eyes, and what she saw there made her chest ache. Grief. Shame. Something that looked terrifyingly like love. Because I'm a coward. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because I'd been searching for your family for years, trying to find a way to make amends for a crime I didn't commit but couldn't escape. And then you appeared in my office building, this beautiful, fierce woman with your father's eyes and your mother's strength. And I was dying, Julia. Actually dying from poison meant for me, finally getting what I deserved. So you used me. Yes. No hesitation. No excuse. I used you. I gave you the card because I recognized your name, because I thought if I could save you, give you everything, maybe I could finally. He stopped, his breath ragged. But then you saved me. You walked into my world without fear. You challenged me. You saw past the monster everyone expected me to be. And I fell in love with you while lying to you about the worst thing that ever happened to both of us. Julia's eyes burned with unshed tears. If you wanted redemption, why did you make me fall in love with you first? The question hung in the air like a blade. Jason's hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers traced the curve of her jaw with devastating gentleness. Because I'm selfish. Because I'm my father's son after all, not a murderer, but a thief. I stole your heart before you knew the price of giving it. I hate you. But her voice broke on the words, betraying her. I know. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. You should. The space between them crackled with electricity. Fury and desire and grief all tangled together until they were indistinguishable. Julia's hands fisted in his shirt, unsure if she wanted to push him away or pull him closer. I don't know if I can forgive you. I know that too. I don't know if I believe you. Ask me anything. I'll give you nothing but truth from now on, even if it destroys us. Julia's breath hitched. Did you plan this? All of it? Did you know from the beginning that you'd make me fall in love with you? No. Jason's forehead dropped to rest against hers, his eyes closing. I planned to save you and disappear from your life. I planned to die with one good deed to my name. I didn't plan on you being brave enough to step into my world. I didn't plan on you being strong enough to survive it. I didn't plan on needing you more than my next breath. His hands framed her face, and when his eyes opened, they were raw with emotion. I didn't plan on you becoming the only thing that makes me want to be better than what I was born to be. Julia should push him away. Should grab those photographs and walk out of this penthouse, this life, this beautiful, terrible man who'd built their relationship on lies. But her body refused to obey, drawn to him like a moth to flame, knowing it would burn but unable to resist the light. Show me. The words left her lips before her mind could approve them. Show you what? Everything. The warehouse. The records. The proof that you're not lying to me again. Jason pulled back just enough to study her face. Tonight. Right now. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes, relief mixed with resignation. If I show you, if you see everything and you still can't forgive me, then at least I'll know the truth. Julia's voice steadied. And I can decide what to do with it. He nodded slowly, then took her hand. That simple gesture somehow more intimate than any kiss. His fingers laced through hers as he led her toward his private office, toward the safe hidden behind the Basquiat, toward the evidence that would either save them or destroy them completely. Behind them, the scattered photographs lay on the floor like fallen leaves. A past that refused to stay buried, demanding to be acknowledged before it could finally be laid to rest. The city glittered beyond the windows, beautiful and indifferent, as two people born into darkness reached for each other one more time, knowing it might be the last. The blue glow of 14 monitors bathed Julia's face in cold light as her fingers flew across the keyboard. 2:47 a.m. The penthouse was silent except for the soft hum of electronics and the distant whisper of Lagos traffic 20 stories below. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight. The high-tech security room, Jason's private surveillance hub that he thought she didn't know about, had become her war room. Her sanctuary. Her arsenal. Julia Munoz, former night shift cleaner, now sat in the throne of information that powerful men had built to protect their secrets. And she was using it to burn their world down. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened screens. Hair pulled severely back, dressed in black tactical pants and a fitted turtleneck that Jason had once bought her for security purposes. She looked nothing like the exhausted woman in a cleaning uniform who'd found him dying 3 months ago. She looked nothing like the uncertain bride who'd stood beside him at their hastily arranged wedding. She looked dangerous. Good. On the center monitor, financial transactions scrolled past. Millions of dollars moving through shell corporations, offshore accounts, untraceable routes. But Julia had learned something in her years of cleaning office buildings at night. Nothing was ever truly untraceable. There were always breadcrumbs. Always patterns. You just had to know how to see them. And cleaners? They saw everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, the tech specialist who used to work nights in the same building where she'd cleaned, a man who owed her for keeping quiet when she'd found him sleeping in a server room after his wife kicked him out. She'd brought him coffee then. Now he was bringing her something far more valuable. Package delivered. Check encrypted folder Phoenix. Julia's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. She opened the folder. Inside were communication logs, encrypted messages between Catalina Ashford and someone using the alias Sentinel. Julia had spent weeks tracking this ghost, this mysterious figure who seemed to be at the center of everything wrong in Jason's world. The embezzlement that had been pinned on her. The assassination attempt that had left Jason bleeding in their bathroom. The whispered threats that made board members look at her like she was a disease. But Marcus had done it. He'd cracked Catalina's private server. Julia's heart hammered as she read through the messages, each one a knife sliding deeper into the heart of Catalina's empire. Sentinel. The girl suspects nothing. She's isolated exactly as planned. Catalina. Good. Keep the board convinced she's stealing. When Owens dies, she'll take the fall for everything. Sentinel. And if he survives? Catalina. He won't. I've waited 20 years to take what should have been mine. I won't let a dying man and his cleaning girl whore stop me now. Julia's hands trembled, but not from fear. From fury. She kept reading, going back through months of correspondence. And then she found it, the message that changed everything. Catalina. The Munoz problem has been handled. Rodrigo won't be exposing anything now. Sentinel. Clean? Catalina. Owens Sr. did the work himself. Made it look like a robbery. The daughter doesn't even know her father worked for us. She thinks he was just a driver. Julia's vision blurred. Her father. Rodrigo Munoz. The man who'd disappeared when she was 7 years old. Found dead in an alley with the case closed as a random murder. He hadn't been just a driver. He'd been something more, something that had gotten him killed. And Catalina had ordered it. Not Jason's father acting alone. Not Jason, that broken 15-year-old boy who'd carried the guilt of a murder he didn't commit. Catalina had orchestrated the entire thing, then let the Owens family believe their own darkness had done it. She'd used their guilt as a weapon, as cover. For decades. Julia stood abruptly, her chair rolling back and hitting the wall. She pressed her palms against the desk, breathing hard, staring at the evidence that would destroy Catalina completely. But there was more. She pulled up another file, the one Marcus had marked urgent. Security footage from the night of Jason's assassination attempt. The shooter hadn't been some external threat. The man in the grainy video was someone Julia recognized. Harold Chun, a senior board member who'd been particularly vocal about her unsuitability as co-CEO. The same Harold Chun who'd been to Catalina's estate 4 times in the past month. Julia cross-referenced the payment records. There, a deposit of $500,000 into an offshore account in Chen's name, wired from one of Catalina's shell companies. The date, 2 days before someone had put a bullet through Jason's side. They tried to kill him, Julia whispered to the empty room. They tried to kill him and blame me for it all. Her phone buzzed again. This time a call. Unknown number. Julia hesitated, then answered. Ms. Munoz. A woman's smooth voice. Or should I say Mrs. Owens? Who is this? Someone who's been watching you very carefully. A pause. You're in Jason's private security room right now. Impressive. Most wives don't even know it exists. Julia's blood ran cold. She glanced around the room, suddenly aware that if someone could see her location, they might be able to see more. What do you want? To help you. Catalina Ashford has underestimated you, just as everyone else has. But I haven't. The voice was almost warm, almost friendly. You're looking at evidence right now that could destroy her. But evidence alone won't be enough. You need leverage. You need protection. You need someone who knows how to navigate the federal system. Who are you? Special Agent Diana Torres, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We've been building a case against Catalina Ashford for 3 years. And you, Julia Munoz, just found the missing piece. Julia's mind raced. The FBI. They could protect her. They could use this evidence properly. They could. Why should I trust you? Agent Torres laughed softly. Because right now, I'm the only person who can keep you alive long enough to see justice done. Catalina knows you're digging. She's known for 2 weeks. Why do you think you're still breathing? Julia's stomach dropped. What? She's been waiting, watching, trying to figure out how much you know and who you've told. The moment she realizes you have everything, the financials, the communications, the trafficking evidence, you become a liability. And Catalina doesn't keep liabilities alive. I can handle myself. Against a woman who's orchestrated murders for 20 years? Who has contacts in every level of law enforcement and government? Who owns half the people you think are on your side? Torres's voice hardened. You're brave, Julia. And you're smart. But you're not invincible. Send me what you have. Let us move first. Then you can watch her empire burn from a safe distance. Julia looked at the screens surrounding her. All that evidence, all that power, all that truth. She thought of Jason, sleeping in their bed 3 rooms away, still recovering from a bullet wound that should have killed him. She thought of her father, dead in an alley, his real story buried with him. She thought of Catalina Ashford, sitting in her estate, drinking expensive wine and planning the next move on her chessboard. She thought of the girl in the cleaning uniform who'd been invisible for so long. And she thought of the woman she'd become. No, Julia said quietly. Excuse me? No. I'm not sending you anything. I'm not waiting. And I'm not watching from a safe distance. Julia's voice strengthened with each word. You want Catalina Ashford? You'll have her. But we do this my way. I'm not your witness. I'm not your informant. I'm the woman who's going to hand you everything you need, but only after I'm done with her myself. There was a long pause. Then Agent Torres laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. You have 24 hours, Mrs. Owens. After that, I'm coming in whether you're ready or not. People like Catalina don't stay in prison unless the case is airtight. Make sure yours is. The line went dead. Julia set down her phone and turned back to the monitors. Her reflection stared back at her from a dozen screens. A woman transformed by necessity, sharpened by betrayal, tempered by love and loss. They'd forgotten where she came from. Forgotten that cleaners move through the world unseen, noticing everything that powerful people carelessly left behind. Forgotten that underestimating someone because of their beginning was the most dangerous mistake you could make. She pulled up a new program, one that would compile everything into an encrypted package. Not just for the FBI, for the press, for the board, for everyone who needed to see what Catalina Ashford really was. But first, she needed one more thing. Julia pulled out her phone and sent a text to a number she'd kept secret for weeks. A private investigator she'd hired with her own money, someone who had no connection to Jason or his world. Need the trafficking files. Everything you have. Tonight. The response came within seconds. Already on your desk. Julia turned. On the corner of her workspace, partially hidden by an empty coffee cup, was a USB drive she hadn't noticed before. Her hands were steady as she picked it up and inserted it into the computer. The files that opened were horrific. Shipping manifests disguised as legitimate cargo, financial records showing payments to corrupt officials, testimonies from survivors who'd escaped Catalina's network. This wasn't just corporate crime. This was evil, systematic, and profitable. And Julia was going to end it. She began uploading everything to the encrypted package, her fingers flying across the keys. Financial crimes, murder conspiracy, human trafficking, communications proving Catalina had orchestrated it all while letting others take the blame. Behind her, she heard the door open. Julia didn't turn around. She knew his footsteps. "How long have you been watching me?" she asked quietly. Jason's voice came from the doorway, rough with sleep and something deeper. "Long enough to know I've never seen anything more terrifying or beautiful in my life. You should have told me about this room. You should have asked." Julia finally turned to face him. He stood in the threshold wearing only sleep pants, the bandage on his ribs visible, his dark hair disheveled. His eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Are you going to stop me?" she asked. Jason looked at the monitors, at the evidence displayed across every screen, at the woman who'd transformed from his savior to his equal to something he couldn't quite name. "No," he said softly. "I'm going to watch you burn it all down. And then I'm going to help you build something better from the ashes." Julia held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to her screens and pressed send. The package uploaded to 17 different recipients simultaneously. FBI, SEC major newspapers, television networks, anonymous tips to every law enforcement agency that might care. In 12 hours, Catalina Ashford's world would explode. Julia stood, her body aching from hours of sitting, her mind sharp despite exhaustion. She walked to where Jason stood and stopped in front of him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. "I did this without you," she said. "Not accusing, just stating fact. I know. I didn't need your permission. I know. I'm not your princess. I'm not something you need to protect." Jason's hand came up slowly, carefully, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, he cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything they'd been through. "You're the most dangerous woman I've ever known," he said. "And I've never loved you more than I do right now." Julia's breath caught. They'd said many things to each other in the past weeks, angry things, desperate things, passionate things. But never that. Never the word that changed everything. Before she could respond, her phone exploded with notifications. "Agent Torres, what did you just do?" "Marcus, holy shit, Julia. It's everywhere." "Unknown, you just declared war." And then, finally, the one that made Julia's blood sing with savage satisfaction. "News alert, breaking, billionaire heiress Catalina Ashford under investigation for murder, trafficking, fraud. Anonymous source provides damning evidence." Jason read the alert over her shoulder. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. "You know she's going to come for us now," he said. "With everything she has." Julia looked up at the man she'd saved, married, fought with, and somehow fallen impossibly in love with despite everything trying to tear them apart. "Let her come," Julia said. "I'm done being afraid of people who think they own the world. It's time they learned what happens when they underestimate a cleaner who sees everything." The night smelled like gasoline and revenge. Julia stood in the shadows of the tree line, 300 yards from Catalina Owens' estate, watching federal agents swarm the property like ants descending on a carcass. Red and blue lights painted the darkness in violent streaks, but it was the orange glow from the east wing that held her attention. The fire she'd set herself, burning through decades of carefully hidden sins. Her hands were still steady. That surprised her. She'd spent the last 72 hours becoming someone she barely recognized. The woman who scrubbed floors and kept her head down had disappeared somewhere between hacking Catalina's encrypted servers and personally delivering a USB drive to an FBI agent who'd been investigating the Owens family for 6 years. The woman standing here now, dressed in black tactical gear she'd bought with Jason's black card, her dark hair pulled back tight, a burner phone in her pocket, was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. Someone who knew how to make an empire bleed. The primary target is in custody. The voice crackled through the earpiece she wore, borrowed from Marcus Chun, the tech specialist from her old life who still owed her for covering his mother's hospital bills 2 years ago. Catalina Owens. They're walking her out now. Julia's gaze shifted to the main entrance. Even from this distance, even in handcuffs, Catalina moved like royalty. Her silver hair was perfect. Her black dress was pristine. But her face, Julia wished she could see it clearly. She wanted to watch the moment a woman who'd spent 40 years believing she was untouchable finally understood what it meant to fall. For additional arrests on site, Marcus continued. Roberto Vega, Michael Santos, Yuki Tanaka, and Cristo Julia. They got Richard Pemberton, the board member, the one who'd tried to frame her for embezzlement, who'd laughed when she'd addressed the board 3 months ago, who'd called her the help at a charity gala while his hand lingered too long on her lower back. Julia allowed herself a smile. Small. Cold. What about the files? She asked quietly. Burning as we speak. The fire department's been delayed, accidentally of course. By the time they arrive, everything in that wing will be ash. The paper trail dies tonight, but the digital copies are already in federal custody. She can't bury this. Good. Julia's finger hovered over the button that would disconnect her from Marcus, sever the last link to the operation she'd orchestrated alone. But she hesitated, because 50 yards to her left, she could hear footsteps. Heavy. Male. Moving with purpose through the underbrush. She knew those footsteps. Her heart, which had remained calm through hacking, arson, and federal conspiracy, suddenly hammered against her ribs. Jason emerged from the shadows like something conjured from her guilt and longing. He wore all black, tactical pants, a dark shirt that hugged the body she'd memorized in ways both tender and desperate. No tie. No suit. This wasn't the CEO. This was the other version of him, the one raised in violence, the one who knew how to move through darkness like he was born to it. He stopped 10 feet away, far enough to be respectful, close enough that she could see his face in the firelight reflecting off the low clouds. He looked at her like he'd never seen her before, like he was seeing her for the first time. Julia. Her name was rough in his mouth. What did you do? It wasn't an accusation. It was awe. She straightened her spine, met his gaze without flinching. What you couldn't. What you wouldn't. I burned down the part of your family that was rotting from the inside. Jason's jaw tightened. His eyes, those dark, dangerous eyes that had watched her across boardrooms and bedrooms, that had seen her as both salvation and burden, moved from her face to the burning estate, then back again. You contacted the FBI. 3 days ago. You gave them Catalina. I gave them everything. Julia's voice didn't shake. The trafficking routes. The money laundering. The murders. Your father's crimes and hers. 40 years of blood money, Jason. I gave them all of it. You did this without telling me. I did this without asking your permission. She took a step toward him, closing the distance he'd left between them. Because I'm not your protected princess. I'm not your responsibility or your redemption project. I'm your equal, whether you've accepted that or not. Something flashed across his face, too quick to name. Pain, maybe. Or pride. Perhaps both. The files, he said carefully. The ones burning right now. Those implicate my father directly. Some of them implicate me. No. Julia shook her head. I separated them. The investigators have everything on Catalina, your father, and the old guard. The evidence that touches you. The things you did as a 15-year-old boy with no choice. That's burning. You don't carry those sins anymore, Jason. I won't let you. His breathing changed. Deeper. Slower. like he was physically restraining himself from crossing the space between them. "You protected me," he said. "While destroying my family, you protected me. I destroyed the cancer. I saved what was worth saving." Julia's throat tightened. "That's what you do for people you—" She stopped herself. Too much. Too vulnerable. Too honest for this moment, this night, this fragile truce between them after weeks of sleeping in separate rooms and speaking in careful, distant words. But Jason heard what she didn't say. She could see it in the way his expression cracked, just slightly, the armor he'd worn since their last fight finally showing a fracture. "Come here," he said quietly. "Jason. Julia. Come here." It wasn't a command. It was a plea. She crossed the space between them, and when she was close enough to touch, Jason's hand rose to her face. His palm was warm against her cheek. His thumb traced the dark circle under her eye. 3 nights of no sleep, planning this, executing this, becoming this. "You're terrifying," he whispered. "Do you know that? Absolutely terrifying." "Is that a complaint?" "It's a confession." His other hand found her waist, pulled her closer until she could feel his heart beating against hers. "I've been protecting you from my world since the night I gave you that card. Trying to keep you separate from the violence, the corruption, the impossible choices. But you were never separate, were you? You were always stronger than I gave you credit for." Julia's hands pressed against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him. The life she'd saved months ago now returned to full strength. "I learned from the best. You taught me how to be ruthless. You just didn't realize you were teaching me to be ruthless against you too." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half something broken. 3 months ago, you asked me if I wanted redemption, or if I just wanted to own you. Do you remember?" She remembered. She'd screamed it at him, actually. Thrown his dead sister's photograph across the room and demanded to know if she was a person to him or just a ghost he was trying to resurrect. "I remember," she said. "The answer is both." Jason's forehead dropped to hers, his eyes closing. "I wanted redemption. I wanted you. I wanted to own you and protect you and keep you safe from every ugly thing I'd ever touched. But that's not love, is it? That's just another kind of possession." "Jason, let me finish." His eyes opened, and they were devastated. "What you did tonight, going behind my back, orchestrating this entire takedown without me, it should make me furious. The old me, the one my father trained, would see this as betrayal." Julia's stomach dropped. She'd known this moment might come. The moment when Jason had to choose between the empire he'd inherited and the woman who'd burned half of it to ashes. "But I'm not furious," he continued. "I'm in awe. Because you didn't just take down Catalina. You didn't just protect me or clear your father's name. You freed us both from chains I didn't even realize we were wearing." Behind them, another section of the estate collapsed with a roar of timber and flame. Neither of them turned to look. The destruction was just noise now. Background radiation to this moment, this conversation, this fracture in their foundation that was either going to break them completely or forge them into something stronger. "Can you forgive me?" Julia asked. The question she'd been too afraid to voice for weeks. "For what I found out. For what you kept from me. For the man you were that night my father died. I was a boy." His grip on her tightened, almost painful. A terrified, broken boy who refused to pull the trigger and paid for it with years of guilt and lies. "But you know that now. You saw the medical records from that night. The skull fracture, the evidence that I was beaten unconscious. You cleared my name before you cleared your father's. Why? Because I love you." The words escaped before she could stop them, raw and true and dangerous in the smoke-filled air. "Because somewhere between the black card and the boardroom and the blood, I fell in love with the man who tried to die rather than hurt one more person. I fell in love with the boy who refused to become his father. And I can't forgive you for lying to me, Jason. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can choose to stay anyway. I can choose faith over forgiveness. Does that make sense?" He kissed her then. Not gentle. Not careful. It was a kiss that tasted like smoke and desperation, and the violent honesty of 2 people who'd finally stopped hiding from each other. His hands were in her hair, her fingers clawing at his shoulders, and for a moment, the world was just this, heat and need and the terrifying relief of being truly seen. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Jason pressed his forehead to hers again. "Faith," he repeated. "You'll give me faith. It's all I have left to give. Then it's enough." He pulled back enough to look at her fully, his eyes reflecting the orange glow of the dying empire. "We're going to have to rebuild everything, you know. The business, the family reputation, our relationship. It's going to be ugly and painful, and there will be people who hate us for what we did tonight. I know. My cousins will see this as betrayal. Some of the legitimate business partners will walk away. We'll be pariahs in certain circles. I know. And there's something else." Jason's expression shifted, something dark and worried entering his gaze. Catalina wasn't working alone. The trafficking network, the real power behind it, she was middle management, Julia. Someone above her orchestrated everything, and whoever it is will know you're the one who brought her down. A chill ran through Julia's body despite the heat from the fire. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying tonight was the beginning, not the end. We won this battle, but the war—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "The war might have just started, and I need to know if you're ready for that. If you can handle what comes next." Julia looked past him at the burning estate, at the federal agents leading Catalina and her associates toward waiting vehicles, at the empire that had been built on blood and lies now crumbling into ash and truth. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, invisible, powerless, scrubbing floors in the building where Jason was dying. That woman would have run. This woman, the one who'd hacked encrypted files and set strategic fires and negotiated with federal agents, this woman didn't run from anything anymore. "I'm ready," she said. "Whatever comes next, whoever comes for us, we face it together. As equals." Jason's expression softened, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something in his eyes that looked like hope. "Together," he agreed. "As equals." He kissed her again, softer this time, and Julia let herself have this moment of peace before the next storm. Because she could feel it coming, in the way Jason's body remained tense despite his words, in the way his eyes kept scanning the shadows beyond the firelight, in the instincts she'd developed that whispered of dangers still hidden in the dark. They'd burned down one empire tonight. But somewhere, in towers and estates they hadn't yet discovered, other empires were watching. And they would not be pleased. The morning light cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse like a blade, sharp and unforgiving in its clarity. Julia Munoz stood at the glass, her reflection ghosted against the sprawling city below. A city that had once belonged to Jason Owens alone, but now answered to both of them. 6 months had passed since Catalina's empire burned. 6 months since Julia had stopped being the woman who cleaned up other people's messes and became the woman who dismantled empires with nothing but evidence and audacity. She wore a charcoal pantsuit today, tailored to perfection, the kind of armor that whispered power without screaming it. Her dark hair was swept into a low chignon, and the diamond studs in her ears, a gift from Jason that she'd initially refused, caught the light like small declarations of war. Behind her, she heard the quiet approach of footsteps. Italian leather on marble. She didn't need to turn to know it was him. "You're up early," Jason said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Board meeting isn't until 10. I wanted to review the numbers again." Julia's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, on the skyline they'd rebuilt together. "Marcus is going to challenge my projections for the Foundation's expansion. I need to be ready." Jason moved beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, but he didn't touch her. Not yet. That was the thing about them now. They'd learned that space could be as intimate as contact, that respect sometimes meant restraint. "He's not going to challenge you," Jason said quietly. "He's going to agree with everything you say, because your projections are flawless and he knows it." Julia finally turned to look at him. Jason Owens, the man who'd been dying in a penthouse hallway when she first found him, desperate and pale and holding out a black card like it was a lifeline, stood before her transformed. He was healthy now, the color returned to his skin, the strength rebuilt in his frame. The tailored navy suit made him look like exactly what he was. A king who'd learned humility the hard way. But it was his eyes that still undid her. dark, intense, and looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "You don't know that," she said. "I do." His hand lifted, fingers brushing a strand of hair that had escaped her chignon. "Because I taught you everything I know about reading financial statements, and you're better at it than I am now." Julia's lips curved just slightly. "Careful, Mr. Owens. That almost sounded like you're admitting I'm smarter than you." "You are smarter than me." Jason's thumb traced her jawline, a touch so light it shouldn't have made her breath catch, but it did. "You figured out in 3 months what took me 15 years to learn. That power means nothing if you can't look at yourself in the mirror." The words hung between them, heavy with everything they'd survived. Julia remembered the woman she'd been, invisible, exhausted, working 3 jobs to pay for her mother's medical bills while the world looked right through her. She remembered the night Jason collapsed, the weight of his body as she'd tried to hold him up, the wild desperation in his eyes as he'd pressed that black card into her palm. She remembered thinking he was insane. She remembered being right. "The car's ready whenever you are," Jason said, dropping his hand but not moving away. "But there's something I need to show you first." He walked to the center of the living room, where a glass coffee table held a single item, a black credit card mounted in a museum-quality frame. The same card that had started everything. Julia had insisted they keep it, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. "You're not going to believe this," Jason said, picking up a folder that had been lying beneath the frame. "It arrived this morning. Courier." Julia took the folder, her trained eye immediately noting the expensive paper, the lack of return address. Inside was a single document, incorporation papers for the Owens-Munoz Foundation, finalized and official. They'd merged their names, their resources, their purpose into something that could actually help people like her father, like the families trapped in cycles of debt and crime that the Owens empire had once profited from. "It's done," she whispered, her fingers tracing the embossed seal. "It's really done." "You did this," Jason said. "I just signed the checks. We did this." Julia looked up at him, and for the first time in months she felt something close to peace. Together. The word sat between them like a vow. The board meeting was a masterclass in controlled violence. Julia sat at the head of the conference table, Jason to her right, a deliberate choice that positioned them as equals rather than hierarchical. Around them, 12 executives in expensive suits watched her with expressions ranging from grudging respect to barely concealed hostility. Marcus Webb, the CFO who'd once openly called her a gold digger to her face, cleared his throat. "Ms. Munoz," he began, his tone careful, "your proposal to expand the foundation into international markets is ambitious. Perhaps too ambitious for our current cash flow position." Julia didn't blink. "Our current cash flow position is the strongest it's been in 5 years, Mr. Webb. The restructuring eliminated $17 million in redundant overhead, and the sale of Catalina's seized assets added another $43 million to our reserves. We can afford ambitious. The optics. The optics are that Owens Corporation is no longer just about profit." Julia leaned forward, her voice calm but edged with steel. "We're about accountability. We're about cleaning up the messes our predecessors made. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, they're welcome to tender their resignations." Silence dropped over the room like a guillotine blade. Then Jason spoke, his voice deceptively casual. "Any other concerns?" Marcus looked between them, saw the unified front they presented, and sat back in his chair. "No concerns. The proposal has my full support." The vote was unanimous. The gala that evening was held at the Regency Hotel. 300 guests informal were drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than Julia used to make in a week. She moved through the crowd in a midnight blue gown, Jason's hand resting possessively at the small of her back. Not to control her, but to remind everyone in the room that she belonged at his side. When they reached the stage, Jason didn't give the speech he'd prepared. Instead, he turned to the microphone and said, "I want to introduce you to someone. Not my wife, though she is that. Not my partner, though she's that too." The room fell silent. "Julia Munoz," Jason continued, his eyes finding hers across the stage, "is the woman who saved my life when I was dying. But more than that, She's the woman who saved my soul when I'd forgotten I had won. She's the co-CEO of Owens Corporation and the founder of the Owens Munoz Foundation. She's the reason this company still exists. And she's the reason I'm standing here tonight. Julia felt her throat tighten as applause erupted, genuine and thunderous. When they left the stage, Jason pulled her into an empty corridor, pressing her against the wall with his body, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was equal parts desperation and devotion. "Thank you," she whispered against his lips. "For what?" "For seeing me. Not the cleaner. Not the weapon. Just me." Jason's hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized had fallen. "I see you, Julia. I always have. I just had to learn how to deserve you." Later that night, they visited the cemetery. Julia's father's grave had a new headstone now, paid for by Jason but inscribed with words Julia had chosen, Roberto Munoz. Father. Truth seeker. Remembered. The investigation Jason had funded had cleared her father's name, proving he'd been murdered not for betraying the Owens family, but for trying to expose the trafficking network that Catalina had run in the shadows. The truth didn't bring him back, but it gave Julia something she'd never had: closure. "I wish he could have met you," Julia said quietly, kneeling to place fresh flowers on the grave. "The real you, not the man you had to be back then." Jason crouched beside her, his hand covering hers. "I wish I could have saved him. You saved me. That's enough." They stayed until the sun began to set, two silhouettes against the dying light, mourning the past while building the future. Back at the penthouse, Julia's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She almost ignored it. She was exhausted, emotionally wrung out, ready to just exist in the quiet comfort of Jason's presence. But something made her pick it up. The message was from an unknown number. No words, just an image. A photograph, old and slightly faded. Her father standing beside a man she didn't recognize. The man was older, distinguished, with cold eyes and a predatory smile. Behind them, partially visible in the background, was a building she recognized. The old Owens Corporation headquarters, the one that had been demolished 5 years ago. Below the image, a single line of text: "The real story begins now. A friend." Julia's blood went cold. She felt Jason's presence before he spoke, his body tensing as he saw her expression. "What is it?" She turned the phone to show him. Watched his jaw tighten as he studied the photograph, his mind already working through possibilities, threats, implications. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jason did something that surprised her. He smiled. Not a happy smile. A dangerous one, the kind that reminded her he was still the man who'd survived assassination attempts and corporate warfare, and a poisoning that should have killed him. "Well," he said, taking the phone from her hand and setting it aside. "That's unfortunate timing for whoever sent this." Julia raised an eyebrow. "You're not worried?" "I'm furious." Jason pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her waist. "But I'm not afraid. We've been through hell, Julia. Whatever this is, whoever this is, we'll face it together." Julia leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "Together," she repeated. Outside, the city glittered like a promise and a threat, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Somewhere out there, someone thought they could intimidate them with secrets from the past. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The cleaner who became a queen. The king who learned to be human. Together, they were unstoppable. And whatever came next, they'd burn it down and rebuild it, just like they had everything else. The message on Julia's phone glowed in the darkness, unanswered but not forgotten. A mystery for another day, another battle. But tonight, in the penthouse that was finally theirs, Julia Munoz and Jason Owens stood at the window, hands intertwined, watching their city sleep. Scarred, weary, powerful, and absolutely ready for whatever came next.